We are back to Rex Arthur TV, Rex Arthur Show, your LGBTQ channel, and we're doing part two of covering the COP24 day, week that's going on from December 4th to 14th of 2018. And so I was just discussing about the sun in the end of the first video, and I was saying to myself and to you that what is so interesting about the sun is that it could have begun, it has a lifespan. So there must have been a time when the sun was very powerful. You know, like young people, when you're born, when a star is born, it doesn't shine that bright. But as it grows, just like a human being, it shines brighter and brighter. So who knows? This is what happened to the sun, and when the sun was growing brighter and brighter, it was destroying life on Earth. And this is what could have led to the death of dinosaurs, and this is what could have led to the evolution of humankind. Because some humans, like if you've noticed Homo habilis and Homo erectus and Zinjanthropus and all these proconsuls and all of these humans where we're said to have been evolved, they were very hairy. And as man evolved, the hair reduced. Reason? Because of the sun. You see, people become hairy because of cold weather. And that's where they get it. So, if you've noticed, human beings who live in very hot areas, they tend to be less hairy. And like when you go to Sudan and you go to the Hottentots of Southern Africa, who are the first ancestors of the humankind, Homo sapiens, they tend to be very smooth-skinned and have little hair because they don't need hair because they live in a very hot place. So what am I trying to say? As humans evolved, they lost hair. Majority of humans lost hair. That's why we don't look like chimpanzees who have a lot of hair, because they lived in forests. Their life was very much in the forest, and in the forest you can hide away from the sun. So what am I trying to say? The sun helped, it changes the bodies of humans and animals and the weather. So climate change means a lot of things, as I've just said in the other video. It means political change, it means social change, it means genetic change, because slowly by slowly, that's how humans evolved. That's why we have mutations. It's because mutations happen over time, and time is a collection of various events, including the strength and intensity of the sun, or the weakness of the sun, including the temperature changes, because very cold temperatures can affect genetic development, just as very hot temperatures can affect genetic development. So you have to understand, that's why human beings are always changing. Even if it takes 10,000 years, changes will come, because within 10,000 years a lot has happened in the climate. Okay, so basically that's why we're focusing on the climate change summit. It's very important, because if you don't focus on climate change, as I've told you in the other video, there will be climate destruction. And climate destruction means social destruction, political destruction, economic destruction, and genetic destruction, because humankind will disappear, because humans will not be able to survive in very harsh conditions like drought, lack of water, or too much floods and fires. So many things will go crazy. And that's why I've told you climate change essentially means political change, it means economic change, it means social change, it means cultural change. Like in the cultural change, we had to stop using plastics. It was a culture. The culture didn't last for long. We used to use plastic bags and everything. Now that culture had to change because the plastics were destroying the oceans. And so we have to change our culture, like I've told you, economic change. We've just read right now from the website of COP24 that Germany is going to make cars without combustion, with the normal oil combustion engines. So that's a change. And it's going to change economically, intellectual change. It's change in every sector of life. Okay, let's go to COP24 Diary Day number 5, which happens to be just the day we are in. And there you have UNFCCC Executive Secretary Patricia Espinosa speaks with Michael Katika, the president of COP24. I wonder what she's doing. She's really looking, wondering what I'm going to do, how we're going to save the planet. Michael. All right. So over this special series, let's see, they're still negotiating, and they continue negotiating on implementing the goals of the Paris Agreement. And here you have Gebru, Jember, and Aleu saying we need to keep the momentum we had in Paris. We need to adopt the rule book here. So Ethiopia is crying for the least developed countries, and we represent 1 billion people who are least responsible for climate change, but among those most vulnerable to its effects. That's the sad thing about Africa and the least developed countries. They are not responsible for climate change, but they are affected by it because they are least industrialized, you see. And industrialization is the cause of climate change, because there's a lot of carbon emissions found in industrial countries. Look at China, very high in carbon emissions, and it's the second most industrious country. So the longer poor countries have to wait for financial support, the larger the cost will become. Yes, I agree. It's going to be a very hard task, especially if finance will be a problem. And so Gebru is kept on crying today, and he said it's so important, and that's what we're really fighting for. Now, US-Polish climate skepticism. The reference to the IPCC 1.5 degrees Celsius report is constant in Katowice. This is because its scientific findings serve as an undisputed negotiating common ground. I like that. Science is undisputable. That's what people need to understand. Well, almost undisputable. The Silesian region of Polish Trade Union issued a joint statement with the US think tank, the Heartland Institute, known for its climate denial stance. They say there's no scientific consensus on the main causes and consequences of climate change, going against the rigorous scientific conclusions established by the IPCC. So Poland and USA, part of USA, disagree with the IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that the world stands at the edge of a climate catastrophe. The group said they met during COP24 and agreed to begin working together more closely to advance sound science-based policy. Anyway, they've tried to work together, but and they're trying to say that their doubts about current alarmist climate policy are correct. The statement also reads, well, I don't really think there is the talks of climate change, you have to look at the science, and if you want to dispute science, come up with science. So we have to look what Heartland is trying to say, but I don't think Heartland can beat the IPCC. Reason being, as I've told you what the research I'm going to do, I believe climate change is a part of the life cycle of the planets. Reason being, the sun has never been in the same position or constant condition. Reason being, it's a star, and stars tend to shine bright, and then they tend to dim, then they shine brighter, and they tend to dim. Now, that's why I am of a different, how I put it, climate change is a mix of not only artificial activities which tend to have catalyzed or accelerated climate change, but rather they are, what do you call it? They are, there is also cosmological changes which are normal. There's a natural climate change that happens because the sun goes through changes. Yes, because it is a living being, in the sense that photons is life, and therefore sometimes the sun can be very bright. Like if you go and watch on YouTube when the sun is having solar flares, there's some days the sun has very few solar flares, and there are other days it has numerous solar flares. So these changes are always happening every day in the sun. So these are natural changes. And as I've told you, the sun had a beginning. Therefore, it may have started as a very small star or a very dim star, and then started shining bright as it grew old. And then, as some scientists have predicted, the sun is going to die. And that means the photons will go away. So what does this mean? That when the sun will die, there will be climate change, whether you like it or not. It will not be the work of artificial or humankind, but it will be the work of the sun's. It's the sun's nature to die because it's a star. So what does this mean? That much as artificial changes, artificial activity can lead to climate change, even cosmological activity can lead to climate change. Only that cosmological activity is not as very strong a catalyst compared to artificial activities, because man has only become industrious for 300 years, roughly 300 years. And in those 300 years, it has really changed. That industry has really changed the climate in a very short time. Because climate change should happen after 1,000 years. But what has happened in the world, it has drastically changed in less than 500 years. That's why it's a catastrophe. Because if we go on with the same rate of industrialization, if we multiply our industrialization rate, then it means we are also accelerating climate change to a point of destruction. It's like a car. Have you seen the racing cars? When you drive a racing car and you overdrive it, your car can even overburn. So that's what's happening. We are over-industrializing. And this over-industrializing is leading to the destruction of the ozone layer. It's leading to the change of the climate very fast, that it's beyond natural levels and therefore is affecting nature. All right, so we'll have to deal with the Polish people who have decided to join Heartland Institute. All right, let's go to Saudi Arabia. And people talked about Saudi Arabia and Brazil and the fossil oils, and Saudi Arabia is the most consistent, insistent, and persistent voice undermining ambition in the negotiation so far this week. So Saudi Arabia is giving people hell. Problems. Sorry. I have to do away with the word hell. I think I've been watching somebody who is always using that word. And as for Brazil, the deforestation plans of the Amazon by Bolsonaro are no laughing matter. And deforestation went up by 32%. and it might reach 25,000 square kilometers a year, with resulting emissions of 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So Brazil is in trouble, and Bolsonaro is so fast at industrializing Brazil, which is wrong. I think my solution for countries that are not industrialized is they should reduce on industrialization, but set up socialist governments. A socialist government is a government that takes care of the people through social welfare systems. And the reason why you're using social welfare systems is because it reduces the hiring of people, which is a very common component in industrialized economies, capitalist economies that are highly industrialized. Capitalist systems tend to be more industrial than socialist systems. Look at the Scandinavian socialist countries. They are less industrialized compared to China and America that are highly capitalist. Now, if all the countries in the world became capitalist in industry, do you know what's going to happen? Number one, profits will drop because Brazil will be making its own cars, it will be making its own electronics, and then Africa will be making its own electronics, making its own blah blah blah, and America will be making. So America will no longer sell its industrial machinery to Africa and Brazil. So what does this happen? What will happen? American businesses will go out of business because Africa now is making its own machines, Brazil is making its own machines, China is making its own machines. Now the problem, when all these regions are making their machines, carbon emissions will increase. And when they increase, the climate change now is even beyond salvation. And what's going to happen? The world will disappear because the weather catastrophes will be too much and they will be wearing down countries. And because countries are not making enough money, because there are very many industries in the world, the countries will have to print a lot of money to solve the weather catastrophes. Look what happened in America this year. You know, they had to get more money from the coffers to pay to deal with what happened in Puerto Rico, what happened in California, even Alaska. Look at the earthquake. And another thing we need to understand, could earthquakes also be part of the climate change issue? Yes, it could be, because the sun heats the earth, and this heating up of the earth can lead to pressure inside the earth structure and therefore encourage earthquakes. We're going to discuss this and see that maybe climate change also does have an effect on earthquakes and tsunamis. Of course, it does have on tsunamis and hurricanes. So just know all the tsunamis that have happened in the 20th century and the 21st century, they are actually products of climate change. And we're going to do that. That's why we're doing these videos. Okay, guys. So that's the discussion. European Union this pressure is mounting on the European Union to ramp up its emissions reduction pledge under the Paris goals. So you see, European Union has to do that. And new EU policies include the binding target of 32% for the share of renewable energy in overall total energy demand, would lead to a 48% share of renewable energy in electricity generation by 2030. Global warming is costly. Global warming of 3 degrees Celsius, which is the estimated trajectory based on countries' current pledges since 2015, would lower global output by 2%. So, meaning the world economy is not going to do better when global warming increases. And if it's 6%, the output is 8% lower. So you see, climate change changes the economy in the negative, because more extreme weather events will lead to damaged infrastructure and will lead to faster capital depreciation. Yes, I was even discussing on another video that the reason why human beings should not be fighting in war is very costly. War leads to destruction of infrastructure, and humans can destroy infrastructure. But guess what? Even nature can destroy infrastructure. So this is why we have to deal with climate change, because it is nature fighting the world. It is nature fighting humankind. It is Mother Nature fighting humans. It is the sun fighting human beings. So it's a tougher war. It's tougher than World War One, tougher than World War Two, because in World War One and World War Two, you can have discussions amongst countries to stop fighting each other. You have agreements. Look at North Korea. It has stopped fighting South Korea because humans can sit down and discuss, but we can't discuss with the sun. And we can't discuss with the wind, and we can't discuss with the rain. So that is why climate change is a very important subject, because nature knows no law. That's what the philosophers have always been saying for thousands of years. So you can see extreme weather destroys infrastructure. And the price of cement increases as years go by. So imagine cities being destroyed because of weather, and the price of cement has gone up. So what does that mean? You'll spend more money to rebuild a city than when you could have stopped it. So the best way is to stop extreme weather conditions, just as we have stopped wars. The world has stopped. We haven't gone to a world war for almost 50 years plus. We're actually hitting 70 years of no world war. And that's congratulations to the world. But it's not enough, because we are now fighting. We have a climate war. Actually, we have not a world war, but a cosmological war. We are fighting with nature at the same time with our systems. Our artificial systems are fighting the natural systems, because the natural systems are not happy with the artificial systems that are interfering with their way of life. The natural system is the solar system and the lunar network, the lunar satellite system, and then you have the ocean system, and then you have the terrestrial system of the earth. All of these systems are not really, we thought as human beings, when we built these things, we thought that the artificial systems are friends to the natural systems, but they are not. That's why there's war. It's a climate war. And as I've told you, this war, you cannot sit down and discuss with the sun. You're wasting time to discuss with the sun. And you've got to understand that the sun has no time to discuss with anybody. Neither does the wind, which is affected by the sun. And neither does the ocean, which is also affected by the sun and the wind. So it's a very, very important report that infrastructure is not only being destroyed by wars, which we have managed to control, but it's being destroyed by nature, which we are not able to control. But the only thing we can do is play our part by drastically reducing artificial output into the natural systems. Good. So as a year of never before seen weather events is about to end, UN Environment released an adaptation gap report, which shows a considerable gap between countries' preparedness for climate change and the actual measures that need to be put in place. So climate change will have a significant impact on human health over the next few decades, and while progress has been made in reducing climate change-related diseases and injuries, current adaptation efforts are by no means sufficient to minimize future health impact of a changing climate. Yes, as I told you, we are cosmological beings. We are climate influenced beings. We are all affected by the climate. There is absolutely no living being on earth that is not affected by climate change. That's why this is the most important summit to happen this year. There is no other summit as important as this. Okay, emissions growth. Global carbon emissions are set to hit an all-time high in 2018. It has risen to 2.7%, and they have risen for a second year after 3 years of little to no growth from 2014 to 2016. So we are really saddened. And as I've told you, this is a time, if you compare what Obama did, I know people don't like hearing what Obama did, but I think he did well when he brought in the clean energy system, because he implemented it around that time. And look what he's saying. They're telling you between 2014 and 2016, which is roughly the last 2 years of Obama, there was little to no growth of the emissions. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say this, that what COP24 can do in the remaining days of the summit is to see what really happened in 2014 and 2016 in terms of action and policies. And that's what you should repeat in 2019. Because, as I've told you, when you look at what Trump is very different from Obama. Immediately Trump came in, of course, capitalism boomed, in the sense that he's a man of industry. He's a man who wants to make money. He's a man, even he reduced the taxes in 2017, if I'm not wrong. I think part of 2016. And he did that. So the tax reduction made industries make more money and therefore emit more carbon in the atmosphere. And then China was also very busy doing the same. And Britain already left EU, so that means they had to have their own, to wake up their industries, local industries, to provide. All of that is happening, and it's very, very telling that from 2017 to 2018, the capitalist drive of industrialization, is actually harming the system against the socialist, or let's say compassionate capitalism, to not to label Obama as a socialist, but maybe a compassionate capitalist, because he didn't stop capitalism. He just said, let's use clean energy. And I'm going to do this research and find out what happened between 2014 and 2016. Remember, this is going to be in our climate playlist, because climate change affects everybody, whether gay or straight. Oil use is growing strongly in most regions. And you can see that. Okay. We need a strong policy and economic support for rapid development of low carbon technologies to cut emissions across the energy and transport sectors, from buildings and from industry, she added, stressing that's a Professor Corinne Lecoeur, the director of Tyndall Center for Climate Change Research and professor of climate change science and policy at the UAE. And she's right. What's the goal as we conclude our video? To cut emissions. That's all. When you cut emissions, you save the ozone layer. The ozone layer can be repaired, and therefore, even if the sun is blazing hot, the ozone layer is being, because what should happen is the ozone layer needs to be restored. So how do you restore it? By cutting emissions. When you cut emissions, then the ozone layer will be able to repair itself. Because another thing you need to know about nature, nature repairs itself. Nature creates its defense systems in the capacity